The invitation from the beasts. Humans sat at the table with apex predators. What happened shocked the galaxy. HFY for the first time in recorded history. The Varnok sent an invitation. Not just any invitation, but one written in the blood-red ink of their sacred war parchment. It was addressed to the leaders of Earth, sealed with a clawed insignia that sent a chill through even the bravest generals. The message was simple: dine with us at the Feast of Dominance. No species had ever returned from that table alive. The Varnok were known across the galaxy as the apex predators. They were not politicians or merchants. They were hunters. When they offered peace, it usually meant death. Their feasts were legendary, not for the food, but for the fear, one by one. Many species had sat at their tables, thinking it was a meeting, only to find themselves hunted before dessert. But the humans, for reasons unknown to the rest of the galaxy, accepted. The Galactic Council held emergency meetings. Whispers filled the void between stars. Have the humans lost their minds? Do they not know what this feast means? Others watched in silence, hoping to witness the extinction of a rising species. The human delegation was small, just 5 people: a general, a scientist, a historian, a diplomat, and a cook. They walked onto the Varnok warship wearing black. Suits with no armor, no weapons, just confidence. The Varnok guards expected fear. They saw calm eyes instead. As the doors of the grand hall opened, the smell of raw meat and burning bone filled the air. The ceiling hung with the skulls of 1,000 species, trophies from past feasts. The long table was made of bones, some still fresh. At the head of the table sat the Varnok High Fang, his body covered in silver scars, each one earned in combat. He grinned as the humans approached, showing teeth longer than a man's finger. He growled, "You are welcome at our table, humans. But know this: only the worthy leave." The human general bowed slightly, then replied, "Then we're glad we came hungry." The hall fell silent. Even the guards paused. No species had ever responded like that. The Varnok were used to trembling diplomats, not bold warriors. The feast began. Live animals were thrown onto the table, their cries echoing through the hall. The Varnok tore into them with claws and fangs, devouring flesh with growls of joy. The humans didn't blink. Instead, their cook pulled out a small case, opened it, and took out a few vials: salt, pepper, chili, and something that smelled like smoke. He calmly sliced a piece of raw meat, seasoned it, and set it on a portable burner. The predators watched, confused. The smell of cooked meat soon filled the room. One of the Varnok warriors sniffed the air and tilted his head. "What is that?" he asked. The human cook smiled. "Just dinner." The Varnok began to circle the humans, testing them with questions, with insults, even with small threats. The human scientist, a woman named Dr. Mira, answered every challenge with facts, numbers, and calm logic. "We've studied your kind for years," she said. "We know your hunt patterns, your culture, even your funeral songs." The Varnok elder narrowed his eyes. "You sing our death songs?" The human historian nodded, then began to hum the tune. The hall once again grew silent. The sound was perfect, not just mimicry, but memory. A younger Varnok whispered, "They carry our ghosts." By the end of the meal, the Varnok were no longer grinning. They were watching, listening, and, for the first time, wondering, were the humans prey or something more? One of them, a younger warrior with golden scars, stood and said, "I came to feast on humans." Then he paused. "But now I wonder, are we the ones being tasted?" The High Fang said nothing, but his claw tapped the table again and again. He looked at each human, measuring them. He saw no fear, no weakness. He saw something dangerous: self-control. As the humans stood to leave, the diplomat turned and said softly, "Thank you for the meal." The High Fang growled back. This was not a meal, the general smiled. It was for us. And with that, they walked out alive. For the first time in Varnok history, guests had survived the feast of dominance. The galaxy trembled, because if humans could sit with apex predators and leave untouched, then maybe, just maybe, they were predators too. The game of fear begins. After the humans left the feast of dominance alive, the Varnok council gathered in the deep chambers of their warship. None of them spoke for several minutes. They sat in a circle of fire, the traditional place where war, honor, and threats were discussed. The High Fang broke the silence first, his voice rough like stone. They did not fear us, he said. They knew us. Others growled in confusion. Do they want war? One asked, are they mocking us? Said another, but the High Fang said nothing more. He simply gave the command that changed everything. Invite them again. Meanwhile, the human delegation had returned to their quiet ship, a simple white vessel floating near the edge of the Varnok territory. Inside, they weren't celebrating, they were studying every movement, every glance, every word the Varnok had spoken. All were recorded. They tested us, said General Rahim. Now they want to play. The next day, the second invitation arrived. This one wasn't for a feast. It was for something much worse. The game of fear. The Varnok called it Zrak Valtho, a sacred tradition where guests were placed into rooms filled with fear, danger, and illusions. Only species that passed the game were seen as potential equals. No one had ever passed. Most had screamed, begged, or gone mad before it ended. Humans accepted the challenge without delay, but they didn't bring weapons. They brought themselves. Each chosen human had survived different kinds of terror back on Earth. War, loss, survival, and silence. They were not just diplomats, they were survivors. The game began in a dark room lit by blue flames. The walls moved slowly, breathing like lungs. Strange voices echoed from the corners, whispering secrets, lies, and childhood fears. A Varnok voice called out from the shadows. Your fear will feed us. Your screams will honor us, Doctor. Myra stepped forward first, her heart racing, but her eyes clear. She stood still, letting the cold air pass through her bones. Then she spoke. Fear is a story, she said, and we write the ending. Suddenly, a massive beast appeared in front of her, made of shadows and flame. It roared, its mouth stretching too wide to be natural. But Myra didn't run. She knelt down, reached into her coat, and pulled out a small recorder. She pressed play. From the device came a sound, a lullaby, a human lullaby, soft and warm. The shadow beast paused, twitched, and slowly vanished into smoke. From the watching chamber, Varnok elders growled in disbelief. She calmed the monster. One whispered, next was the cook, a quiet man named Dallin. He was placed in a room with endless shelves of raw meat, knives, and a hungry growl circling him. A predator watched from above, drooling, but Dallin did not panic. He lit a small fire, cut a piece of the meat, and started cooking. The smell filled the air, confusing the creature, when the beast dropped down. To attack, Dallin offered it a plate, and the predator stopped, sniffed and ate, not out of fear, but curiosity. Feed fear, and it becomes hunger, Dallin whispered. General Rahim's room was filled with war sounds, screams, bombs, chaos. He had been a soldier once, but he stood still, closed his eyes, and began to hum the Varnok war hymn they had heard at the feast. The illusion broke like glass, and the room turned white. Each human faced a different room, each filled with nightmares. But none of them screamed. They used memory, emotion, and calm silence. They faced terror not with strength, but with understanding. When the humans emerged, untouched and unchanged, the Varnok were silent. This silence was different from the one before. It was not the silence of anger or confusion. It was the silence of respect. A respect not easily earned, The High Fang walked to the center of the floor, claws dragging against the steel. He faced the humans and said, "You did not break." Rahim stepped forward. "We never came to win. We came to understand." That single sentence was recorded by dozens of hidden cameras. When it was broadcast across the galaxy, billions of species watched it on loop. For the first time, the universe saw something in the humans it had not seen before. Not power, not aggression, but courage without violence. And that was far more dangerous. Back on their ship, the humans gathered quietly. No celebration, no pride, just one silent thought shared between them. The real game has just begun. The first challenge, the bone trial after surviving the game of fear, the humans were invited again. But this time, the Varnok made no attempt to be polite. No firelit halls, no shadowy illusions, no silent tests. This invitation was raw and brutal. They called it the bone trial. In the ancient laws of the Varnok, the bone trial was not just a test. It was a challenge meant to break bodies and crush spirits. Those who failed were considered food. Those who passed were considered worthy. But no alien species had ever passed. When the humans entered the arena, the walls shook with the stomping of thousands of Varnok warriors. They shouted, growled, and beat their chests as a heavy gate opened. From the shadows came a beast, massive, armored, and snorting steam from its nose. The crowd roared, "Break its spine or be broken." The High Fang growled from his throne. The humans stood still. General Rahim glanced at the team, then slowly stepped back. Without saying a word, the youngest human walked forward, a scientist named Asha, no older than 28. She wore no armor, no weapons, only a thin lab coat and thick boots. The Varnok warriors laughed. A child? A woman? Surely this was a human insult. But the High Fang raised a claw, ordering silence. He wanted to see what would happen. Asha slowly approached the creature, her movements calm and steady. She didn't run or charge. Instead, she crouched low and studied the beast's spine, legs, and eyes. She tapped her fingers in a rhythm, then reached into her coat and pulled out a small device, a pulse reader. "What is she doing?" growled one of the warriors. "Is she studying it?" asked another. Yes, she was. Asha stepped closer. Now only one breath away from the beast's face, it snorted and pawed the ground, ready to charge. But she moved faster, not with violence, but with knowledge. She pressed her thumb into the beast's lower neck, just between two bones, right on the nerve cluster. The creature stiffened, groaned, then dropped, not dead, not injured, just paralyzed. The arena went dead silent. Every Varnok present leaned forward. Stunned, the creature wasn't broken. It was neutralized, safely, efficiently, peacefully. The High Fang stood up, his eyes locked on Asha. She did not crush it. He said slowly. One of his generals answered. She controlled it. Asha turned to the crowd and said one sentence. "Power is not just strength." Then she walked back to the team, heart beating fast, hands slightly shaking, but her face showed only focus. The Varnok did not cheer, they did not growl, they whispered, because what they saw was something new. A predator that didn't need to kill to dominate. Back in the chambers, the Varnok argued for hours. They cheated, some said. They refused the tradition, but the elders replied. She followed the rule. Break the spine or survive. She did it with knowledge, not claws. That night, in the silent sky of the Varnok homeworld, a symbol was etched into the clouds by their ships. It was the mark of partial honor, a rare sign of respect, never before given to outsiders, but now offered to humans inside the human ship. Asha sat quietly in her room, staring at her hands. She had not intended to prove anything. She simply wanted to understand, yet her actions had shifted the balance. The Varnok, once sure of their superiority, now felt something they had never felt before. Doubt and doubt, in the heart of a predator, is more dangerous than rage. As the ship floated silently above the stars, General Rahim whispered to himself, "They brought us here to see what we fear, but now they fear what we are." The taste of fire the Varnok had tasted blood from every corner of the stars. They had swallowed the hearts of warriors, gnawed bones from fallen beasts, and feasted on the raw power of galaxies. But there was one thing they had never tasted: fire, not the kind that burned ships or carved scars, but the kind that transformed. Food, the kind that turned death into flavor, that kind of fire, belonged only to humans. After the bone trial, the Varnok allowed the humans one request. They could present something from their own culture. Anything. It was a gesture of false generosity, an ancient tradition meant to show dominance. Predator lets the prey speak, only to laugh at their weakness. But the humans did not bring words. They brought heat. They brought flavor. They brought a story told not by language, but by scent inside the Hall of Claws, the largest chamber. On the Varnok ship, the humans set up a table, not made of bone this time, but simple steel, and on that table they placed a small black device. It hissed gently, glowing orange from within. The Varnok watched with confusion, some with disgust. The human cook, Dallin, stepped forward. He was silent, calm, wearing a stained apron. In his hands were raw pieces of Varnok beast meat that even predators struggled to chew without bleeding. He dropped them on the hot surface, and the air changed. It was smell, it was smoke, it was memory. Even the warriors who had never known fear took an unconscious step forward, noses twitching. "What is this scent?" One growled under his breath. Dallin said nothing. He flipped the meat, added spices from tiny containers, salt, garlic, crushed leaves from Earth's oldest forests. He moved like an artist painting in flame. With each turn, the aroma grew. Stronger. Even the high fang blinked twice, confused by the sudden knot in his throat. When it was done, Dallin placed the meat onto a thick slab of stone and stepped back. "We call this cooking," he said. "It is how we show respect to what we eat." The Varnok warriors stared. Then one stepped forward. A brutal female fighter named Vorak, known for ripping out throats with her teeth. She picked up the slab with her clawed hands, sniffed it, then bit. Silence. A long, slow silence. She didn't speak. She chewed, slowly, eyes wide. Her body shivered once, not in weakness, but in something older, something deeper. The high fang growled. "Is it poisoned?" Vorak shook her head, still chewing. "No," she said quietly. "It's alive." Other warriors rushed forward, pulling pieces apart with impatient claws. They devoured the cooked meat like addicts, growling, huffing, shocked by their own hunger. It wasn't just taste. It was something they had never known. Balance, warmth, peace. "You burn your food," one whispered, "but you also burn the fear. You soften death," another growled, "and make it beautiful." One of the elders fell to his knees, claw shaking. He had eaten raw flesh his entire life, broken bones and sipped marrow. But now he felt tears rise. Not from pain, but from flavor. The high fang stood slowly, eyes fixed on the humans. "You tamed the beast with heat," he said. "You brought fire not as a weapon, but as a gift." Dallin nodded. "We cook to honor the life we take. We eat not to conquer," he added, "but to understand." That sentence traveled through the Varnok fleet like lightning. Ships whispered the words across space. Species who feared the Varnok began to ask new questions. Could these humans teach even monsters to care? Later that night, in the private halls of judgment, the Varnok high fang looked into a mirror. He saw his own face, painted in centuries of war. But now, he saw something else too, uncertainty. "They made our food sing," he whispered, "and we listened." Back on the human ship, Alan cleaned his tools without emotion. He said nothing to the others, but deep inside, he knew. The war was never about weapons. It was about culture, and fire was only the beginning. The secret weapon, language. The Varnok were creatures of war, not words. Their language was ancient, made of growls, deep tones, and clicks that shook the walls of stone. It was said only the strongest Varnok could speak the old tongue without. Choking on their pride, it was sacred, it was feared, and no outsider had ever dared to learn it until now. After the fire feast, the humans were invited again, this time to a council hall buried deep inside the Varnok's planet. The walls were black stone, and the seats carved from the bones of fallen kings. The Predator Council sat in silence, all eyes on the humans. The High Fang stared with burning suspicion. He didn't offer food or drink. This was no feast. This was judgment. General Rahim stepped forward, his boots clicking gently against the cold floor. He said nothing. Instead, he looked to the side. A new human stepped forward, someone who had not appeared before. She was quiet, young, and wore no rank. Her name was Linya, the team's linguist. She had spent 10 years in silence, learning sounds most humans couldn't hear. While others fought wars, she listened. While others shouted, she translated. And now, in the heart of the most feared species in the galaxy, she opened her mouth. Her voice came out low, rumbling, perfect. She spoke the Varnok tongue, not broken or slow, but fluent, deep, natural. She used the greeting only spoken by blood elders. Through claw and sky, I enter your shadow. The chamber froze. One elder dropped his blade. Another blinked in disbelief. The oldest among them stood slowly and whispered, "That is not possible," Linya continued. She recited Varnok war poems, death chants, and birth odes. She even sang a mourning song, one only spoken during the burial of a war leader. The High Fang's eyes trembled. His hands clenched. He remembered hearing that same song when his brother died. "How did you learn this?" He growled, his voice shaking with rage and wonder. Linya paused, then said one line that echoed across the galaxy. "We listened, not spied, not stole, not forced. They simply listened, recorded, studied, respected, where others feared thee." Varnok language. Linya honored it. The council murmured in disbelief. "They know our words. They remember our losses. They carry our names." One Varnok counselor, covered in black scars, stood up. He looked at Linya and asked in his own tongue, "Why would prey learn the voice of predators?" She looked into his eyes and answered, "Because we never believed you were beasts." A long silence followed, a silence heavier than steel. Even the air seemed afraid to move. The High Fang walked forward, his steps slow. He stood face to face with Linya, towering above her. Then he spoke. "Say my name." She did, perfectly, with every syllable correct, every pause honored, and with that, the High Fang did something no one had seen in centuries. He lowered his head, not in shame, not in defeat, but in respect. Back in the human ship, the team sat in silence. They knew something had changed. The humans had not fought, not threatened, not bribed. They had simply spoken, and the galaxy had listened. In that moment, the Predator Council was no longer sure who the predators were. Because true power, they realized, is not found in claws or teeth. It is found in understanding, and humans understood everything. The Predator's trial was the oldest law in Varnok history. The Predator's trial. A test not of words, not of knowledge, not of taste or language, but of survival. A trial where diplomacy ended and instincts ruled. Where creatures were thrown into the arena, not to compete, but to endure. This was not a place for honor or mercy. It was a place soaked in blood, echoing with the cries of those who failed. Many species had been invited to it. None had returned. It was not a challenge. It was a message. Only the apex survives, and now the humans had been called to enter it. The invitation came as a growl broadcast across every starship in orbit. Enter the pit, the high. Fang commanded, or leave our world. The council chamber was silent. The galaxy watched, waiting for fear, hesitation, maybe a retreat. But instead, General Rahim stood tall. He didn't flinch. He didn't ask questions. He simply nodded and said 4 quiet words. We'll go in first. The Varnok were stunned. Even the council elders blinked, unsure if they had heard correctly. No species had ever volunteered. Not one, the predators. Pit was a living place. It shifted shape, responded to fear, adjusted its dangers to the species within. It learned. And now it had to learn what humans feared most. As the steel gates opened, the 5 human delegates stepped forward. No armor, no weapons, only their minds. The floor beneath them pulsed like a heartbeat. The walls bled mist, the color of nightmares. Within moments, the arena changed. It formed images from Earth's past. Wars, floods, burning cities, lost loved ones. Each human faced something personal. Yet none turned away, Doctor. Mira walked. To a storm of screaming voices, memories of her lost childhood. But she did not cry. She knelt and wrote equations in the dust, proving the storm's energy was just noise. This fear is only data, she whispered. Linya, the linguist, stood inside a hall of mirrors that spoke back to her in broken Varnok. Each mirror mocked her, twisting her voice, but she listened, corrected the dialects, and taught the reflections to speak clearly. Even the cruelest voice can be understood, she said. The cook, Dallin, was placed in front of a starving beast, a Varnok hybrid. Chained and trembling, the creature lunged, snarling, but Dallin offered it food, cooked slowly with calm hands. The beast paused, sniffed, then lay down. Hunger is stronger than hate, he whispered. General Rahim faced a battlefield, hundreds of fake soldiers shouting orders, but he did not give commands. He walked into the center of chaos, raised a white flag, and kneeled. The soldiers froze. The war ended. We win by choosing not to fight, he said, and then the arena stopped. The floor hardened, the walls cracked, the trial was over. In the viewing chambers above, the Varnok stood in silence. They had seen death, war, and fury for generations, but never something like this, never species who overcame. Fear not by destruction, but by peace, by strategy, by compassion. The High Fang rose from his seat. He was not angry. He was not confused. He was something far rarer. Humbled, he walked to the edge of the pit and looked down at the humans below. You entered without weapons, he said, his voice low. You left without wounds, the human diplomat. A quiet woman named Erin looked up. We were never here to conquer, she said. We were here to be known. The silence that followed stretched across planets. Even ships in orbit paused their engines. Even predators held their breath. That day, for the first time, the predator's trial did not claim victims. Instead, it gave something back. Respect. The galaxy did not know how to process it. For if humans could survive the deadliest ritual without violence, then maybe violence was no longer the only measure of strength. Back aboard their ship, the humans sat around a small table. They shared food, water, quiet words, no cheers, no celebration, just a long look toward the stars, because they knew something powerful had shifted, not just in the trial, but in history itself. The new apex, the stars had seen wars. They had seen planets break, leaders fall, and civilizations rise like dust in the wind. But they had never seen this. A silence so thick, so heavy, it wrapped itself around every ship, every chamber, every breath. The humans stood in the center of the Varnok world, not with weapons, not with shields, but with stillness. They had passed every test, every challenge, not by becoming monsters, but by remaining human. The Predator Council gathered in the circle of fire. All elders, all warriors, all tribes, each one scarred by centuries of battle. Each one taught that dominance was survival. And now they had to vote. Do we name the humans as our equals? Asked the High Fang. Or do we prepare for war? The council growled. Some feared what the humans had shown. Others were ashamed. One elder slammed his claw into the stone. They did not break the beast, he shouted. They fed it. Another answered, and that is why they're stronger. But then, before the vote could be cast, a voice rose from the outer circle. Small, young, trembling. It was a Varnok cub, no older than 10 cycles. His eyes were wide, his claws unformed. He walked slowly into the center alone. The guards moved to stop him. But the High Fang raised his hand. Let him speak. The cub looked at the humans, then turned to his people. My father taught me that power comes from fear, he said. But the humans were not afraid. He took a deep breath. And when they were, they didn't hide it. They didn't run. They shared it. Then he walked to General Rahim and did something no Varnok had done in 1,000 years. He bowed. The circle gasped, not in anger, but in understanding the High Fangs. Eyes filled with something no one had seen in him before. Water. He stood slowly, and for the first time in his life, lowered his head, not because he lost, but because he saw the truth. The humans were not above the Varnok. They were not below. They were beside. The council voted without words, one by one. Each predator stepped forward and pressed their claw into the stone of judgment. And when the last mark was made, the stone glowed red, the ancient symbol of new blood. It meant that a new apex had been named, not one to rule, but one to walk beside. In that moment, the galaxy changed, not because of war, not because of death, but because 5 humans entered the oldest ring of power and left it whole. The signal was sent across every star system, every ship, every colony. Humanity has been accepted by the apex. And across 100 species, fear turned to curiosity. Curiosity turned to respect. Back aboard their ship, the humans sat quietly. They didn't celebrate. They didn't smile. They looked at the stars and knew what came next. Responsibility. Because now the galaxy was watching. Not to see what humans would destroy, but to see what they would protect. In the final report sent to Earth, General Rahim wrote one line. We were never prey. We just waited for the right table.